grammar school, I should say, elementary school. And first day I walked in, of course I was the new kid because I started somewhere, I guess it was probably October. And school session had already started, and I was the new kid in town, and I didn't know anybody, and I was begging my mother to not take me to school that day, if I could hold off another couple of days or something like that. In fact, I even gave her the wrong directions to how to get to the school, so and Mrs. Roth was our teacher. Miss Roth.
But she was so mean, no one would ever marry her.
You named the school after, though, I understand. Anyhow, the teacher was Miss Roth, and she assigned Bob the unenviable task of showing me around. Bob was going to show me the ropes, introduce me to everybody. And from that day, Bob and I became best friends. And although we were separated by many, many miles, Bob and I always remained in touch, and I have to admit, it was mostly through Bob's efforts. But I hear a lot of people talk about Bob and his integrity and his work ethic, his sense of family, his sense of devotion to his family. And it's pretty obvious because if you listen to Lori and you listen to Marilyn and you listen to Kenny and you listen to his son Richard, you understand the influence that he had, and you understand how they were in turn influenced by two other people that I think deserve mention at this memorial service, and that's Mary and Bill Whalen, his mother and father, who I knew quite well. And this young lady over here asked if Mary knew what was going on in the basement. Fact was, yeah, Mary knew what was going on in the basement. Mary knew a whole lot more than any of us ever thought Mary knew. And his parents, your mom and dad, were such wonderful people. And if you want to find role models that influence Bob and influence their children and develop that work ethic and develop that sense of devotion and develop that sense of family, it was Bill and Mary Whalen. And I'll tell you something, I've got story after story after story, and I'm sure Tom does too, and I don't want to steal all his thunder because I know he wants to tell the story of the boat. So I'm going to let him tell that story. But there's dozens of different stories that I could tell about Bob, and some of them probably, I'm glad that the years have separated these events because maybe we've learned to accept some of them, but one of the ones that I remember most clearly, and thank God I wasn't involved directly, but we had a mutual friend by the name of George Phoenix. George was a very interesting soul, he was. George was another one who owned a Jacob's Ladder. Also married his 15-year-old cousin at the age of 17. I was the best man at the wedding. But anyhow, George had a lot of different skills, one of which was lock picking. George had keys to every room in the school, and he also had a combination of the master safe at Lakeland Regional High School. And of course, in the days before computers, report cards were written by hand. Now, I don't know whether Lori or Penny or Marilyn remember this story, but George distributed copies of blank report cards to many of our friends who decided that they could just simply fill in their own grades. So Bob had actually gotten away with this scam for almost the entire year. He had his real report card, and he had the one he thought he deserved. And he got away all year. But as luck would have it, Mary Whalen caught him. I'll never forget, I came over after the last day of school, and Bob was in his room, and he's got his head down. I got caught. He got caught. He was lying on the bed with both report cards in his hand, gloating about how he had scammed Mom and Dad. Mary had walked in and said, "Oh, what's that?" Now, most parents would just go, no big deal, but no, Mary wanted to know more, and she looked and she goes, She discovered that Bob's grades weren't quite as admirable as he had indicated them to be. He graduated, there was no problem, but that was one of the best stories that I remember. There were also wonderful stories about Bob, who taught me how to drive, especially driving stick shift. He had a 47 Plymouth Coupe. This was one of the most dangerous vehicles ever on the road.
Don't forget the...
This vehicle was just, it was a pollution. I mean, if we're having trouble with the ozone layer and global warming, that vehicle was probably responsible for at least 50% of the pollution. We used to have to stop every block and put oil in it. It was blowing so much out the back. And Bob taught me how to drive a stick shift, and with great patience. Now, if any of you have ever learned how to drive a stick shift, if you've ever had a real nice car, all right, that had a stick shift, and you try to teach somebody, you hear the gears grinding, and, well, Bob let me grind all it. Oh, don't worry, no, calm down, just give a little more gas, be a little careful on the clutch, you've got to. And, I mean, this was his transportation, this was his pride and joy, this was his baby, yet he let me grind those gears and tear up that clutch, and always did it with a smile, always did it with patience, and always did it with that ultimate friendship that Bob always showed throughout his life. And we took that car in terrible places. We had it driven into a dry bed of the Passaic River. Bob didn't care. We got out, we pushed it out, everything's fine, we're okay. Boom, boom, boom. Just story after story. But the point I want to make is that even after we were separated by time and years and so forth, Bob used to call me. I always knew that I could always depend on a call from him on my birthday. Bob's birthday and mine were around the same date. His was January 8th, and mine was the 13th. He was 5 days older than me. And he would always call me on it. If I forgot to call him, and many times I did, he would always call me. And in fact, I said to my wife this year, I said, I wonder if something's wrong with Bob. He didn't call me on my birthday. And we had spoken around Christmas time, and he said he was having trouble with his phone. He was getting a new phone, and he was going to call me. And I hadn't heard from him, and I got really nervous when I hadn't heard from him. And I had a feeling that things might not be going so well. And unfortunately, it turned out that way. But I can tell you one thing, that throughout the years, Bob always remembered me. He always remembered my birthday. He always remembered my wife, my children, my brother and his wife and their children. I remember that after my first niece was born, Kelly, Bob came over, he had a big panda for her, okay? Make sure Kelly gets this. He remembered things about people's family. It meant a lot to him. Family was very, very important. And like I say, it came from his mother and his father, who imbued that into all their children. And I'm going to miss Bob. I'm going to miss that call on my birthday, okay? And I'm going to miss the conversations that we used to have and the reminiscences and so forth. But I'm going to remember all the good things and all the good times and what he did for me and the friendships that we had. And one last quick story, because I know Richard wants to hear stories. All right? Bob had a milkman that lived across the street, Mr. Weber. Yes. And Bob and I came in, again, our illicit purchases. We came into the possession of a great amount of fireworks. One of them, we had bottle rockets, we had M80s, we had ash cans, we had lady fingers, you name it, we had it. We could have set most of New Jersey on fire. And Bob also had a wonderful collection of model airplanes that he built. I mean, built by hand. These were the old ones. He stuck with a Duco cement, and you had to put on the little decals that you floated off in water. They were real pains in the neck. I don't know if anybody even does them anymore. Bob had quite a collection. They were hanging from the ceiling in his room. He says, we ought to make them things fly. But come on, we put so much work into it. Yeah, but just think